Hello guys, one moment. First of all, compliments for the result achieved. Because we are here for the semi-final of the national championships. An important result for you guys. Compliments indeed. First the debate, I would like that the jury introduce themselves to the speakers. I will be the chair of this debate. I'm Gianluca Presunti. Then I will leave the floor to my colleagues to introduce themselves.
My name is Teresa Summa.
My name is Monica Senarica.
Hi everyone, I'm Giovanna Falcone.
I'm Chiara Mancini.
Okay. Then I would invite you to enjoy this debate and do your best. Okay? If you are ready, we are ready. So, I give the floor to the first speaker of proposition team.
So my speech will start in 3, 2, 1, okay. Good afternoon, dear judges, fellow debaters and spectators. Today I will be the first speaker for the proposition team, and I will also do the reply speech. So today we are discussing the motion, public broadcasting should be abolished. We as a proposition are in favor of abolishing public broadcasting because of 3 reasons. These are our 3 arguments. First of all, public broadcasting is manipulated from the state and so spread manipulated informations. Second of all, we have private broadcasting would guarantee freedom of expression and freedom of thought. And thirdly, we have costs to maintain public broadcasting can be used in more useful fields. But before moving on to our first argument, we would like to give you some definitions about the motion. Public broadcasting are those broadcasting that are of the dominion of the state. So those public broadcasting are, for example, the BBC or the RAI. By being abolished, we mean that we don't want them to exist, and we are going to prove that they are more harmful than good, and this is where they should be abolished. Nowadays, in the present world, 86% of the people watches TV daily. In our world, so in the present world, most of the broadcasts that are seen on the TV are public broadcasts. So, for example, the RAI. RAI is the most seen public broadcasting, and in general, the most seen broadcasting in Italy. As the BBC is the most seen broadcasting in the UK. In the world that we are proposing as the proposition, we think that instead we should have a plurality of broadcasting that are private, and in order to abolish the public broadcasting, we're going to do that. So first of all, the funds that nowadays the state is giving to these public broadcasting would be redirected into more useful fields, as we're going to talk about in our third argument. As we're going to also talk about in our first argument, people working for this kind of broadcasting are usually unhappy. And if we abolished this public broadcasting, not only the people who work for them would be happy, but also since private broadcasting would be more used and would be more accessible, then new job places would be created in those kind of broadcasting. And so there would be no problem of not finding a job for those who are currently working in that field. So now I would like to talk about the stakeholders of this information. Are those people who are working for those companies or those public broadcasting, also those people who are working for the private broadcasting, because private broadcasting would have more earns and more benefits from it. And also all the people who sees the information that are spread by public broadcasting and those who are seeing the information spread by private broadcasting. So moving on to our first argument, we want to abolish public broadcasting because they are manipulated from the state and spread manipulated informations. As examples, we would like to bring... Yes, please.
Are you aware that that public broadcasting is independent from the government and it is only financed by the government?
The example that we are bringing and that I was about to bring explains you why it actually is not, even though theoretically it should be. RAI has had many problems with this because very few time ago, the journalists that were working for the RAI decided to go on strike because the RAI agreed with the government to give the full speeches given by the current government, the members, and those who are exponents of the actual government. Also, the RAI has had many problems in the 25th of April because a script was refused to be given by the direction of the RAI that was according to the government that we have presently. And so the journalists understood how it is a violation of the one of the most important human rights, that is freedom of expression, freedom of thought, that we, with our model, will for sure guarantee more than it is actually happening. In order to do that, we also have another example for the first argument, that is the Institute Luce. Luce was the public broadcasting when there were the regime of fascism. It was a public broadcasting and it was used mainly for propaganda. The informations that were spread and that are actually spread, even though we're not under a dictatorship, are informations that are passing through the opinion of the government, are informations that are not giving the whole vision of the world. And now moving on to our second argument, we will explain you why instead private broadcasting would be a solution to it. Well, private broadcasting, contrarily to public broadcasting, are openly of somebody. For example, Mediaset is not a public broadcasting. Mediaset openly belongs to the Berlusconi family. We know the position that Berlusconi family has while talking about politics. And we can agree with that or we cannot agree with that. But in fact, we know the position that it has. We know the position that it has, and so we can choose if we want to agree with that position and so listen to the information that are given from this channel and from this broadcasting, or if we don't want to. Instead, with public broadcasting, it cannot happen because we are prone to think that public broadcasting is independent and that is giving informations that are necessarily true and dissociated from any political opinion. But we have demonstrated to you that within our first argument that this does not happen. It has already happened in the past and it is again happening nowadays. Also, private broadcasting are many. We have also Netflix, we have also Sky that are giving private broadcasting. And we can choose if we want to follow them. We can choose the way, the information we want to enter in contact with. And this is the main difference between public broadcasting and private broadcasting. That in one case, in the world we're proposing, we have the opportunity to choose between the information we want to enter in contact with. We have the possibility to choose those informations and these sources that we retain more reliable. While in the public broadcasting, if we did not abolish public broadcasting, the problems that nowadays are still existing, so for example the monopoly of the information, as well as the not respecting the freedom of expression and the freedom of thought would remain. And so this is why we proudly propose the motion and want the abolishment of public broadcasting. Thank you.
I thank the speaker for a fine speech, and I will give the floor to the first speaker of opposition.
Okay, my speech will start in 3, 2, 1, now. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, honorable judges, fellow colleagues from the opposition team, and dear coaches and spectators. Today, we are here debating the motion, this House believes public broadcasting should be abolished, and we, as an opposition team, will prove you why this abolition is not necessary. In fact, I want to start explaining you why we are debating this motion today. Why is it important? Nowadays, the access to information is becoming more and more important to be able to keep up with the situation in the world. Our pro team is proposing for an abolition of the public broadcasting, but we do not think that it would bring any benefit to our society. Instead, it would only bring harm. And with our arguments today, we will prove you that we do not need this abolition of public broadcasting. In fact, we believe that private and public broadcasting that could coexist. So we are proposing for a more moderate approach than the one proposed by the proposition team today. In fact, we do not think that public broadcasting is the only mean and the only way of information, but we think that it could be a mean of information and it could be efficient. So it should coexist with the private means of information. So they also stated that the public broadcasting is manipulated by the government, and it is actually not true because it's only it only takes funds from the government, and there's also par condicio, which means that every parties of the government can have the same time to talk in public broadcastings. Yeah?
Don't you think that having economic control on someone means they have influence on them?
Yes, but we think that governments has the duty to provide public services, such as public broadcasting. And also, we have already explained with the par condicio, that means that all the parties have the same influence on the public broadcasting, that what are you stating is not really true. Now I'm going to present our team line, and we're going to talk about 3 arguments today to demonstrate our ideas. The first being the right of people to access to the information. The second being that public broadcasters are fundamental for a country's culture. And the third, that would be developed by my teammate Matilde, is about the impact of this motion. So moving to my first substantive, we know that it's the right of the people to access to information. In fact, public broadcasting ensure access, no thank you, to information to keep up with the global situation. But why is public broadcasting so important? Because it can basically reach everyone. Even people that cannot have access to the other means of information such as social media, for example, because we know that social media are a great source of information, but they are not accessible to everyone. In fact, for example, think about older people. Older people have no access to the internet, maybe, and on social media, but public broadcasting is the only way that they have to reach knowledge, and Obviously, today we are not saying that public broadcasting should be the only mean of information, but we're saying that we need also to achieve this, to achieve a complete knowledge. So we need a coexistence of different means of information that comprehends even public broadcasting. Moreover, public broadcasting provides entertainment for people that maybe feel bored, entertainment accessible to all people, such as, for example, the elderly people. In fact, the data clearly state that public broadcasting is essential for people over the age, for example, of 55. In fact, the average time spent watching public TV is 40 hours for a week for men over 55 and 43 hours for women over 55. No, thank you. Moreover, we know that public broadcasting is less expensive than private ones. In fact, it makes it more accessible to everyone. In fact, what they're proposing with only the private broadcasting is not really realistic, because not everyone could have access to knowledge. Now I want to move on to my second argument, that is that public broadcasting is fundamental for a country's culture. We know that every country has its public television, and it is really important for the cultural and historical part of a country. For example, in Italy we have the RAI, or in Great Britain they have BBC. We know that the public broadcasting is something that everyone has in common in a country. It's something that is a factor that spread a sense of community. Is something that accommodates all the people from that country. Moreover, in the public television, there are mainly educational programs with the aim of educating the audience. A clear example could be the RAI. In fact, it was the first Italian television, and it is part of our culture and of the history of our country. It helped building the identity of our nation. An example could be the spread of the Italian language. In fact, when Italy became a country, not everyone was able to talk the Italian language, and the spread of this public TV helped a lot with the spread of our language. In fact, it helped to educate people, and it is also its aim now. In fact, we can say that a lot of programs that we can see in the public broadcasting have the aim to educate the audience. It also helps building the identity of the nation, so the sense of community and of nation that wasn't really present in our nation at its starting point. So, what have I told you so far? With our opposition today, we've demonstrated that this abolition of public broadcasting is not necessary, and we need a coexistence of public and private broadcasting and even other means of information, because we are not saying that we need only public broadcasting. Moreover, they are less expensive, more accessible, and help to reach a sense of community and to reach everyone. So, please, for all these reasons, we beg you to vote for the opposition team today. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Good morning, everyone, dear judges and fellow debaters. today I will be the second speaker for the proposition team. I will start right away with a rebuttal for the things that have been said by the very first speaker of the opposition team. First of all, the speaker started by saying how public broadcasting actually is independent from the government because it only takes funds from the government, but it's actually independent in its own ideas. And now there is par condicio when people are saying their opinion on there. First of all, we don't agree with that as, yes, there might be this par condicio, but we don't think that's actually efficient and actually represented in public television, as we know that the current government is more influential than the opposition. And we show that by our example of the speech that was censored for the 25th, and how other things have been censored in the history of RAI. For example, not only that, but also what has been said during the Festival of Sanremo of just some singers wanting to express their opinion and then being censored. This being said, I would like to go on with another thing that was said by the opposition team. It was said how people have the right to have information and be informed. We agree with that, but also private broadcasting can do so. Also private television as a means of communication and information. Yes, please.
Have you considered the costs?
Yes, we consider the cost, and that's actually our third argument. So I will go more in depth on that by continuing my speech. I will start continuing with the rebuttal first. We talked about how private broadcasting is not accessible to everyone, but we mentioned a very famous example, which is Mediaset, and we think that's accessible to everyone, as everyone can see Mediaset programs on TV. And those provide entertainment that apparently, as the other speaker of the opposition said, is provided mainly only on public television, but we do not agree with that, because also private ones provide good entertainment shows. It was mentioned the sense of community that creates public television, and how in the past RAI was able to educate people into learning better Italian and the spreading of the Italian language. We agree to that, and that's the effect that it had in the past. We're talking about today's world. Yes, we had positive example of public television in the past, of good things RAI did, but we're talking about 2024. Right now, we have the example of the Festival of Sanremo, of the 25th of April, of people being censored and not able, no thank you, of saying their opinion. So we don't think that something that worked in the past necessarily works right now in today's world. This being said, I would like to go on with the third argument for the proposition team. Our argument focuses on the costs that public television has, and now this cost, because of all the detrimental characteristics of public television, should be used in other fields. So we know, talking about RAI, but also about BBC, that were already mentioned both by the first speaker for the proposition team, those are both services that, even if they're public, we need to pay. So there is a fee for seeing RAI programs. There is a fee for even owning a TV. That's something that people need to pay necessarily by just owning a TV. And we are seeing on these programs that we are paying biased information that is controlled by the government, as stated in our very first argument. But also, we are not having such good quality programs because they're biased, but also because they are controlled. So we think that those funds that we're paying should be invested. The ones used by the government should be invested, and the one paid by us should go into more, through our taxes, into more important fields that still need to be improved. For example, the education field. Definitely by investing in educational activities like schools, no thank you. But also in other activities like cinemas, theaters, we would have a better education than the one that could be provided on public television and broadcasting, and we would also be able to have better quality system and services than the ones that we have right now. Also, by providing and paying for having the funds of the government or ours invested into, no thank you, into public and to private television, we would decide in what to invest. We would decide what we think it's good to invest in and what is actually reliable and good for us and our opinions. What we think that it's actually free because they showed us that it's free. For example, I don't think everyone agrees on paying a fee for a public broadcasting system that already showed, yes, thank you.
Are you aware that private broadcasting is actually more expensive than public broadcasting?
Well, I would like to give an example of one private broadcasting. Okay, first of all, one private broadcasting that is not being paid right now is Mediaset, because the fee we are paying is for RAI. And then, if we want to talk about other possible private broadcasting that we can think of, that are mainly about entertainment, we can think about something like Sky, Netflix, which are mainly around €7 per month. So we think that compared to what we are already paying for public television, if we're not, it wouldn't be that much in comparison. This being said, I would like to sum up what has been said by my team in our third three arguments. The first argument we presented focuses on on how manipulated and controlled is public broadcasting by our government, our current government, and how influential it is right now compared to all the rest. Also, our second argument mentioned in particular how inefficient would be to have public broadcasting and how private one instead is better both for freedom of expression, but also when talking about expressing our political ideas, because we are deciding, as said in our third argument, in what to invest in, and at the same time those funds that the government is right now spending will be invested into better fields, like, for example, education, which will be more reliable than the one that we're going to find on television on just a program. Thank you for listening. This is the end of my speech.
Okay. My speech will start in 3, 2, 1, go. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and dear judges. I'm the second speaker for the opposition team, and I'm here today to present you our third argument, which is the impact that the abolishment of public broadcasting would have on people. But before moving to my argument, I'd like to rebut some things that the proposition team said today. First of all, their main point is that public broadcasting is basically manipulated by the government, but let's think about it. It is not true. Why? First of all, because the public broadcasting are independent from the government. This is something really important. Second of all, because in public broadcasting there are some laws and some guidelines that provides to the public broadcasting to be partial, to be neutral. In fact, as we said before, there is the par condicio, and this means that every parties in the political scenario of a country has the same amount of time to talk about their ideas and their opinions and their beliefs. And for this reason, it is really important for you to focus on this fact, because it means that the government is not manipulating the public broadcasting. No, thank you. The other thing that they said is that public television was important in the past, but nowadays it is not. This is actually not true, because it is still a very important mean of divulgation, because we know that there's the majority of the elderly people, no thank you, the majority of elderly people prefer to watch TV, to watch the broadcast, the public broadcast, because it is easier for them to get an access to that kind of information. Also, they talked about the fact that we should invest more money in schools, because that's a better way to educate. But let's think about Alberto Angela. He is a very important divulgator, and he talks about he deals with historical arguments, historical topics, where on the news, on the RAI. So he is using the public broadcasting to talk about this thing, and professors often use his videos to educate the students. So this is really important. No, thank you. Also, they said that you have to pay fees for the public broadcasting, but let's be honest, you have to pay fees for everything that is public. This is something normal in our society. You have to pay fees to have a healthcare, to have public healthcare, but this is just in a second. But this is really important, because this is how our society works, and we have to be thankful for that, because it is a right for us to have public services such as public broadcasting. I'll take your POI. Thank you.
I think that having access to television entertainment is just as much as a fundamental right as healthcare.
Yes, for sure, because information is fundamental in our society, because to have an access to information is one of the rights of the people, as we proved you in our framing, because we said that nowadays there are many things going on in our world, and therefore it is important to keep updated and to know what is going on. Also just to live, because you need to vote and you need to take decisions in your life, and to keep updated with what is going on in the world, it is fundamental. In fact, now I'd like to move to our third argument, which is the impact that the abolishment of public broadcasting would have on people. But why is this argument important? Well, of course, because we need to take in consideration how this abolishment would affect the people, because they are the stakeholders in this motion. And with this argument, we are going to prove to you why the impact of this abolishment would be more harmful than good. And we're going to do that with three main points. The first one is social injustice. The second one is the spread of disinformation. And the third one is monopoly of information. So let's start with the first one, social injustice. If we want to abolish public broadcasting, it means that we're not letting all people the access to information, as we said before. In fact, what would the impact of this be? Simply, it would create social injustice, because between the people that can afford to pay a subscription, whereas there are people who can't afford to pay a subscription to private broadcasting. And in this way, these poor people that are already left out by our society, they will be even more left out. They will be cut off from all the news and from the access to information. And this is something that we cannot stand, and something that we really disagree on. The second very important point is the spread of disinformation. Why? Because logically, if you cut off the people that can't afford to pay private broadcasting, it means that many people will not get the access to the news, right? And this is actually one of the, no, thank you. With this argument, I'm going also to answer the POI that was asked me before. Because why is it dangerous that people don't get the access to the news? It is really dangerous because they would not know what is going on in the world. And also, we said before that the news are one of the main means of divulgation in our society. Therefore, if there are many people that rely on the news, rely on the information they can get by public broadcasting, right? Of course. But if we are going to abolish this, they can't rely on this anymore. And this is really, really important. This is really dangerous because there's going to be a drastic increasement of disinformation. And why is this a problem? Well, of course, because it is very dangerous in our society. Because they said that if the government funds are going to the public broadcasting, it means that they're manipulating the public broadcasting. But think about it: if people do not get the access to the information, it means that they do not have critical thinking. They do not acknowledge what is going on in the world, and that means that they are easier to manipulate. It is really important important for the people to get access to information. And with this, I'd like to move to to the third point, which is the monopoly of information. Because, as we said before, if we abolish public broadcasting, it means that what's left, it's only private broadcasting, right? They said so, and we said so. So this would have a harmful impact because it would cause a privatization of the informations, because all the informations would be in the hands of private organization, right? Yes, and this can cause many, many troubles, because they're saying that the government manipulates the public broadcasting, but this is not true, because the private broadcasting, they would bring the news only regards their political party, the political party they stand on, and therefore everything you would see on private broadcasting is only focused on their view, and it actually creates more problem. Also because in public broadcasting, there's a representation for everyone. They host members from different political parties, right? And for all this reason, dear judges, for all the examples that we brought, for the impact, the harmful impact that we proved with 3 main points, that are social injustice, monopoly of information, and spread of disinformation, we beg you to vote for us. Thank you so much.
My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Hello, esteemed judges and fellow debaters. Today I will be the third speaker for the proposition team, and I will be first rebutting to what the opposition team said, and finally I'm going to be rebuilding our arguments. First of all, let's talk about something that's been discussed in this debate for a while. The fact that the opposition team completely denies the fact that if you depend from something financially, you will inevitably be influenced by them. You do not bite the hand that feeds you, judges. If someone is giving you financial support, you are going to have to stay to the rules. The fact that they cannot refute the examples that we have given, for example, on the speeches that were not allowed to be said, or on the censorship that we've been talking about, proves the fact that they also are aware of the fact that the opposition team is also aware of the fact that RAI is sponsoring these things and that they're economically dependent from them, leads to the fact that they're censored because of that. Second of all, we want to talk about the fact that they are the opposition team is just assuming that the information given is going to be reliable. But who is saying this? Who is saying that all information on broadcasting channels is reliable and is fact-checked? Especially, for example, for the fact that they keep on stating how the elderly only watches TV. But if the elderly is only getting information from one specific place, doesn't this make it even more biased? Doesn't this make it less of critical thinking that the second speaker was speaking of? They were stating how without public broadcasting, there would be less critical thinking. But wouldn't actually critical thinking improve from the plurality of sources that we have proven with our arguments, with the fact that we want to implement private broadcasting and therefore have a plurality of things? Actually, something to expand on the first argument of our team is the fact that we did not state that Roberto Sergio, just in a second, who is the administrator for RAI, actually stated, he is the chief of RAI, he stated that they cannot compete with private broadcasting sources because they just have this plurality that is not allowed, that is not comprised in RAI. Please give your POI.
Are you aware that on public broadcasting they host people from different parties and with different opinions?
I've never said they don't, but this doesn't mean that, for example, certain parties will not be favored maybe in the editing of the show, or maybe the fact that clearly let's say one party will be represented and will be figured as better than the other because the influences from the specific broadcasting is going to be evident. Also, we're going to talk about how several times in this debate, they do recognize the value of private broadcasting, and we do not understand why they want to keep both if we clearly have been talking about and we're proving how one of them is just unnecessary and outdated. Especially on the outdated thing, we think that something that they have been taking as for granted, that the opposition team has been taking for granted, is the fact that just because, just in a second, that the fact that this is a tradition, there's a tradition in Italy, just because something is a tradition of a country, this does not mean that it's necessarily right. This is definitely a fallacy, especially given that as the first speaker for our team talked about how also Istituto Luce was a tradition of our country. This doesn't mean that it wasn't promoting intolerant ideals and ideas that we should not be identifying with. Please give your POI.
Are you aware that public, in our world, in our scenario, both public and private broadcasting can coexist?
That is what I just refuted. I've talked about why should both exist if one is just inefficient and it doesn't work. Why can't we just get rid of it? If clearly also the fact that, for example, we have to pay for both, how does this make sense? Especially also, thank you for that, because I'm going to be talking about the examples of payments, because they were talking about how the payment for private broadcasting is more expensive. We obviously recognize that, but however, the cost of public broadcasting is forced on us, because anyone who owns a TV needs to pay a customer's fee to RAI, and so therefore this is not really a democratic decision that someone is making. This is more something that's being forced on you. No, thank you. So therefore, we believe that if actually it would be money better spent if you could choose where to spend it, and as we've talked about in our decision, especially given that, as we've proven in our arguments, the fact that we are paying for something that is biased, something that is misinformed, because it's owned by state, as I've talked about. You don't bite the hand that feeds you, therefore they will have influence on that. For example, the example that they gave of par condicio a lot isn't necessarily true, because just because more people are invited and there's a plurality of ideals, let's say, this doesn't mean that the broadcasting network will not always favor one instead of the other. Also, we want to talk about no, thank you. We want to talk about how they stated after my PRI saying, do you think that entertainment is a fundamental right? They stated yes, and they turned it into information. However, this was not what we were discussing. Not everything that's being public broadcasted is information and is something that has educational value. Let's think of all those programs that have no educational value whatsoever, and they only have entertainment values, and that is not a human right, judges. We cannot say that watching reality TV is just fundamental right just as much as health, for example. Actually, they kind of helped us in this case, because they talked about how information is a vital right, and that is what we are proposing with our model. We're proposing a model where information comes first and foremost, and where it's being promoted in institutions that are more that are less controlled by the state and therefore less unbiased. For example, as the second speaker for the proposition team was talking about schools. Also, we want to acknowledge how there are other ways to get information if information is such an important topic. For example, old people, they have failed to mention how, for example, they often read the newspapers. Or, for example, how nowadays younger people always have social media. And we're not saying that these are unbiased sources, but we're saying how from this plurality of sources, which would also come from private broadcasting, we would have more points of views, because obviously they're not being economically financed by a state that has a certain ideology, and therefore someone could actually use their critical thinking in our model and not the opposition's. To finalize my speech, I would like to remind the judges that the three arguments that we brought today are the fact that public broadcasting is inevitably manipulated by the state, especially because of economic controls I've proven briefly, just before. Second of all, the fact that private broadcasting will be better because of the plurality of sources and because they're not biased and misinformed, and there are more sources, therefore more critical thinking instead of their models. And finally, the fact that we need to invest in something that is not outdated, something that we can get actual information from, and something that that we also believe is fundamental, which is information, but we should be getting from other sources which are not public broadcasting. And this is why I proudly propose the motion and think we should abolish public broadcasting. Thank you for listening.
Okay, my speech will start in 3, 2, 1, now. Okay, good afternoon, dear judges, dear proposition team, dear spectators and coaches. Today we're here to talk about how public broadcasting should be abolished. And we, as opposition team, have proved you, and I will further prove you why this is not the right decision, as it would bring way more harm than actual benefits. And we've explained with some of the points, and now I will start to rebut with what the proposition team had to say. First of all, they were talking about reliability, how the public broadcasting services are not reliable. But one thing here we are missing. How would abolishing public broadcast solve these problems? Solve the problems of reliability, of sources, and of actual politics being influencing the news that we get. Actually, that is something that will not happen if we abolish it. But actually, it would worsen. It would make the situation even worse. Why is that? First of all, they stated themselves that private broadcasting services are actually more openly politically have a more open and precise political position than public broadcasting services. That is, yes, that is true, and that is why it is so harmful. If we have, let's say, 10 different broadcasts, one is regarding a different political approach, and we have to pay to be able to access each and every one of them. How can we be able to afford, how can everyone, the public, the population, be able to afford to have a more wide political view that is not influenced singularly by every single one if there are so many? And that is why it would actually make, as also my teammate Matilde said, politics way even more divisive. Public broadcasts are telling news, are telling what's happening, no thank you, what's going on. And yes, it is more controlled, it's actually more controlled because of laws that are regarding the public, and par condicio that we talked about, have more laws and more control, so can have actually more rights approach to these topics than private ones that have its own economic interests in actually getting their political message to the spectator more openly, and that is something that is very harmful, would make politics more divisive, and would also make the information exclusive to political parties. So it would make information actually something private. Is this really what we want? To make being able to access information more expensive and also more confusing, let's be honest. It would be so confusing. You have 30, no thank you, different opinions on this, and not maybe one broadcasting public program that is not perfect. Yes, it is not perfect. We're not saying that it is. But also our government is not perfect. That is why we want public broadcasting to coexist, no thank you, with private broadcasting that can bring even more views into this. But it's very important to have a more per condicio approach to these topics. So also they brought many times the example of Mediaset, but are they aware of what actually Mediaset goes on about? There was actually a movie made by Sorrentino that ironically talks about Mussolini and everything. Can we see this movie in Italy? No, because Mediaset banned it from people being able to see it. No, thank you. Mediaset, as a broadcasting service that is private, influenced by Berlusconi, of course, that founds it, gives it money, gives it the economic support that it needs, because if there are not public funds, there need to be private ones. Who would want to invest in something if they don't get something back from it? So politicians would actually get back the votes and the influence that they give. So their approach would be way, way more harmful than what public things can do. So how would abolishing the public broadcast solve these problems? That is something that they have not explained to us. How would these problems be solved? And how would they guarantee freedom of speech in these private broadcasts? That is something that is not clear. Also, I would also like to go on some of the, yes.
Could you give us some examples of public broadcasting respecting those things that you are talking about?
Yes, that is going on every day. Sorry, I'm not an expert. I don't have all the data that I can get by reading on you, but not everything goes on in public broadcasting is fake news and is being influenced. That is something that is totally wrong to think. That is like not the point of why public broadcasting was made. So thank you for your PI, but it was not really making sense. So what have we told you so far as a proposition team, and why their points about why the points that they made were not really standing? They talked about how the funds would be non-democratic because it is not democratic to pay for something that you don't have any interest in listening to. That is literally the concept of taxes. We pay for things that we are not sure that we will get, no thank you, access to. So maybe an elderly person pays for tax, they go to schools. Does he go to school? No. But it is how literally governments work. Saying that taxes are non-democratic is really something outrageous to think about. So, yes, thank you.
But isn't paying for fundamental services different than paying for entertainment as a bias?
Yes, but here we're not only founding entertainment, we're founding actually a divulgation, like we talked about Pierangela, divulgation of scientific knowledge, of political knowledge, of a much wider spread of knowledge than there could be also in private ones. So we're not talking just about, as they're trying to make us tell, entertainment. This is much wider, and also public, by definition, public TV talks more about educational matters than others. So yes, that is it. So what have we told you as a opposition team? We talked about accessibility, so how abolishing this would make information more exclusive and would deny people the right to access the information of what is going on in the world, if you wanted to know it. And public information was abolished. How would you choose to pay for something, pay for 30 different private broadcast programs to be able to get a really confusing idea of what is going on? That is not realistic. Public, yes, it has a small fee, but it's more accessible to everyone, and it is way, way easier to get information out of it. Then we talked about how it is important in countries, how it's not really obsolete because it's such a big thing in our country. Defining things just because they have existed in a long time as obsolete, we have to recognize the role that public divulgation has today. They're not acknowledging the big role that it plays in our society. Also, the impact, we talked about social injustice, the spread of disinformation that would actually be get worse, as I proved you. The monopoly of disinformation by political parties, political division, and more economic interest in information that should be a human right, and the privatization of this. For all of these reasons, we beg you today to vote for opposition team. Thank you so much.
Speeches, starting with the opposition side.
Okay. My speech will start in 3, 2, 1, go. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and dear judges. We have come to the end of today's debate, and I'm here to show you what the outcome of today's debate actually is. Let's start by saying this. We, as the opposition team, proudly believe that the access to information is a right for everyone, and we cannot stand the idea that public broadcasting should be abolished. During this debate, there were many clashes, many points of discussion, but let's go through the main one. We can say that there are manipulation, the payment, privatization versus accessibility, and education, the role of education. Let's start with the manipulation, because the proposition team and the opposition team clearly have two different views of manipulation, because the opposition team thinks that the manipulation that would go through broadcasting, it is more damaging when it's come from the government's funding, because they think that public broadcasting, it is more manipulating because it is being paid by the governments. But we, as the opposition team, proved you with many examples that this is not true. With many examples as the par condicio one, or as the fact that many private broadcasting are actually manipulated too by politicians such as Mediaset. Actually, we as opposition firmly believe that actually the manipulation comes from private companies, as we proved you with our third argument, because they would monopolize the information and would only talks about the information that regards their political views, the political party they believe in. Second, let's move to the second clash. That was payment, because clearly we had two different ideas of payment. Because for the proposition team, they believe that paying fees to get a public services such as broadcasting, it is something not democratic, something that should not happen. Whereas we, as the opposition team, believe that a public services such as the broadcasting services is fundamental in our society, and it is important for us to pay taxes to get an access to it. And therefore, it is worse to pay more to get a subscription for private broadcasting. Then we have privatization versus accessibility, because clearly we stand, as the opposition team, we stand on the idea that people have the right to get access to information. Also because we proved you that there would be many damages, because there would be an increasement of the spreading of disinformation, and there would be social injustice, whereas they stand on the idea that privatization, it is better, because we don't really know why, because they didn't really prove us why it should be better. The last one is education, the role of education, because we, as the opposition team, firmly believe that public broadcasting has a very important role in education, as we proved you with our arguments. Whereas they think that education it is not taking consideration in public broadcasting, but we proved you that this is not true. So what are they proposing then? They're proposing a scenario where it is better to reduce the access of information to the people, and where people that cannot afford to pay a subscription, they cannot get to know what is going on, they cannot get to an access to entertainment, where they believe that private companies would companies would monopolize the information. And this is what we stand on. This is our scenario. In our scenario, it is really important that our scenario is democratic. We think about everyone. We want to give the access to everyone. And this is fundamental, because this is the reason why we are here today, because we need to give people the right to have an access to information. Thank you so much. We beg you to vote for opposition today, for the many examples and the arguments that we've brought. Thank you.
Thank you, Matilde. And now move on to the opposition reply speech that will end this interesting debate.
Okay, so my speech is starting in 3, 2, 1. Okay. Good afternoon again, dear judges, fellow debaters, and spectators. I have the pleasure to end this extremely fine debate, and I would like to start my reply speech by presenting you the clashes that we've had. So first of all, we have the clash of par condicio. On the side of the opposition, they have been talking about how public broadcasting are guaranteeing par condicio. Secondly, they've been talking about accessibility, and so they have been talking about how private broadcasting would not be accessible to everyone. Or still, they have been talking about the access to the informations that sometimes may be, on the opinion of the opposition, misunderstood or spread in a bad way by private broadcasting, or still about manipulation of private broadcasting. Wow, nice. How? They didn't give us examples. All the things that I have been talking about do not apply to the reality. Instead, on the side of the proposition, we have demonstrated to you on the same clashes that par condicio has not been respected in our first argument. We have demonstrated to you how the government is affecting the things that are being said by public broadcasting and how par condicio is not respected. This was one entire example that we as a proposition brought. Also, about accessibility. We have proven, with the example of Mediaset, that actually also private broadcasting are accessible to people. Also, about the information, we have proven to you with examples that most of times public broadcasting are giving only partial informations and information that are agreeing with the political view of the government. And about manipulation, we've had an entire argument about manipulation. We have been talking to you about how this public broadcasting is manipulating with its pervasive presence and with its influenced opinions, all those manipulated informations. We have proven all these things to you. So now I would like to ask you a question. Would you prefer to live in the world of the opposition, where nothing actually applies to the reality, and where public broadcasting are still existing, and so the major font of information is giving misinformation, is giving wrong information, is giving informations that people understand as true, that people think that are true and that are actually impartial, but that are not, because we have demonstrated you that. We have demonstrated that instead, on our side of the world, we can have a better world. In our side of the world, we have proposed you a model that can actually be applied, that guarantees the freedom of thought, the freedom of expression, the freedom of information, because if we only had private broadcasting, we could choose between the informations that we are talking about. We could choose between those visions that are openly leading to some political view. But private broadcasting are more. Private broadcasting are openly part of a political vision. And so, since we know that, we understand it, and people has a better informated opinion and can create it. So, if public broadcasting brings all these problems, why should we keep it? We should not keep it. We have demonstrated to you that abolishing it, we would have a better world. So this is why we are winning this debate, dear judges, and I hope you will vote for us. Thank you.
Thank you. I declare that this debate is over, and I strongly recommend those present to make applause.